Stay away from Tauerpin Road. To be honest, I'm not sure if writing this is a good idea. It's been close to 4 months since everything happened, and at times, it still feels like a bad dream. One I need to shake off and forget. But I know that if I don't at least try to tell the truth now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life, however short it may be. I can't fit the full account into one cohesive segment, thanks to the word limits of this site, so I'll just have to try and get it all out there one day at a time. I doubt anyone will believe me, but I'm used to that by now. It all started last October, when I still worked as a tour guide for the New Wilderness Wildlife Reserve. I'd stayed late to help clean up in the kitchens after volunteering to work concessions in place of a girl who had come down with the flu. With the last of the guests gone for the night, I stood at the big industrial-grade sink and wiped the last of the dishes dry before lugging the stack of clean plates, bowls, and cups toward their rightful places on the stainless steel shelves. Both of my feet hurt from standing on them all day, and a small knot had formed in the small of my back. But still, I smiled. Never thought I'd be happy to scrub salad bowls. My second year at New Wilderness had been amazing, and I couldn't wait to come back next season. Everything about the little park was perfect, from the adorable animals, friendly coworkers, and surprisingly healthy food, to the picturesque rural Ohio landscape. Since my first interview in the year prior, I had done some tours on the regular safari buses, as well as odd jobs around the facility, without discovering a single thing that made me want to quit. Even kitchen duty at the Hilltop Cafe turned out to be way more fun than I'd expected. I'd learned to bake bread from scratch, and Cassandra, my 40-year-old supervisor who knew every knife, pot, and pan like the back of her hand, praised my culinary talent to the skies. "See you later, Maddie," Cassandra shouted over the stove exhaust fans with her usual happy-go-lucky cheer as I walked out the door to the parking lot. "Good job today. You were a big help." "Thanks. Have a good night, Cassandra," I chirped back and let myself give out a contented sigh. I love my job. In the darkened parking lot, a cool breeze brushed past my face. It promised to be a beautiful fall night, the wind blowing in from the west, the stars twinkling in view as the last of the sunlight faded, and a crescent moon beamed down from above. Few cars were left atop the ridge where the visitor center stood. My own little blue sedan, its paint chipped and peeling, waited for me, and I silently hoped it would start. Dad had been having issues with its starter, but it hadn't acted up in a few days. Here's to hoping that record holds. I unlocked my car door to climb in and caught sight of a familiar black SUV pulling up the hill, the words "Park Ranger" stickered to the side. My pulse jumped. The smile on my face melted into a grimace, and a twinge of nervousness knifed through my chest. It could be Randy, I told myself, or Daniel, or Phyllis, any of the other night guards. It didn't have to be him just because I was here. The SUV rolled through the parking lot, and the driver spotted me, his casual grin unmistakable. Oh no. Hot embarrassment flooded through my cheeks at the lanky silhouette who put the SUV in park and climbed out to saunter over to me. The night had been going so well, and it didn't have to end like this. After all, he wasn't within voice range yet. If I wanted to, I could pretend not to see him, jump into my car, hide my face, and floor it for home. He wouldn't know for sure that I didn't have somewhere important to be, and I could avoid the awkward conversation, maybe even put it off for another 5-month winter season. Yet, despite my brain begging me to leave, I stayed and put on what I hoped to be a friendly smile to hide away my anxiety. From 4 feet away, Mark hooked his thumbs into his jacket pockets and rested one hip against my car's front fender. "Hey, stranger. Long time no see. How have you been?" Mark Petrick and I had met during my first year at the reserve's Carnivore Cove in between breaks on our tour bus routes. He was nice, smart yet easy to talk to, and he never seemed uninterested in anything I had to say. As it turned out, it was his first year too, and like me, he had already fallen in love with New Wilderness. Despite being surrounded by strangers, Mark went out of his way to include people into the conversation who wouldn't have stood a chance on their own, told self-deprecating jokes to draw fire away from anyone who felt singled out, and in general played the part of a peacekeeper between difficult personalities when tensions flared. He always acted with unfailing kindness towards me, and I considered him to be a good friend. We exchanged contact information, and I enjoyed having someone to chat with in between sessions of Skyrim in my after-work hours. Then, 3 months later, Mark texted me and asked me to dinner. To be honest, I'd seen it coming. Could tell by how often he'd messaged me how happy he was whenever I responded. A few other guys at previous jobs had also shown interest in me, and while Mark was definitely better mannered than them, it was still obvious. I knew it was a scenario that other girls at New Wilderness would have welcomed with glee, but for me, a knot formed in my gut the moment I saw his dinner invitation pop up on my phone. I sat on my bed, put my head in my hands, and fought waves of nausea because, in that moment, I knew that I didn't have feelings for him. Not the slightest romantic spark. Mark was my friend, one I really enjoyed spending time with, and I didn't want to lose our friendship. But I couldn't leave that text unanswered for. So I did what I knew was right. I let him down as easy as I possibly could. Mark took it really well, said he still wanted to stay friends, and we even talked some more after, though eventually the conversations died out due to my lack of enthusiastic replies. Though relieved to have it over with, I felt awful for weeks afterward, knowing that my rejection had hurt him deeply. He was a great guy, but I just couldn't bear the thought of going out with Mark, only to have to dump him later when I still didn't feel any different, and see that pain etch itself over his face. Perhaps that's why, when Mark announced his engagement to another girl at the beginning of this year, a little of the guilt lifted from my shoulders. He'd been a bundle of giddy smiles when I'd overheard him talking to one of the other tour guides about his fiancée, and I wanted to be happy for him. I wanted to, anyway. "I'm fine." I bobbed my head like a doll on an old truck dashboard, wishing I could dig the shame from my chest like an unwanted parasite and stomp it on the ground. "You?" Mark's cocoa brown eyes seemed to see right through my nervous facade, and he made an apologetic half-smile. "I'm good. You want to hurry? I don't want to keep you." Those last words stung more than I expected them to, and I almost winced. A part of the reason I couldn't be relieved, happy, or calm around Mark Petrick was because even though I still thought of him as nothing more than a friend, deep inside my selfish heart, I'd felt sick the moment he said the word engaged. One of my big goals was to find the love of my life, settle down with him, and have lots of kids in a nice cottage in the countryside. I'd confessed as much during our early conversations, before Mark revealed his feelings for me. While him moving on was a big relief, something inside me panicked at the thought that I may have thrown away my one chance to find the happiness I'd been dreaming of. That selfish despair left me plagued with shame every time I thought of him, because I still saw Mark as a friend, yet felt a hollow sadness at him finding someone else. "No, Mark, you definitely don't want to keep me." "Maddie?" His soft voice broke me from my ashen thoughts. I looked up to find Mark staring with sympathetic eyes. "Look, I just wanted to say hi. Did I make this weird?" Wishing I had an invisibility cloak, I shook my head, conscious of how my frizzy auburn ponytail swished against my neck. "I'm just tired. I was in the kitchens all day today. My feet feel like they're on fire." His warm grin returned, and Mark threw me a wink. "Making more of those amazing cupcakes?" Of course he remembered my strawberry upside-down cupcakes. I'd made them for one company picnic, and Mark complimented me to no end for it. Everyone had liked them, but looking back, it left a bittersweet taste in my mouth at the way Mark had tried my cupcakes first out of all the other delicious desserts there. "Homemade bread." I leaned against my car door, grateful for its support to hide my shaking hands. "The cupcakes are for special occasions." Silence reigned between us, broken only by the groaning wind that creaked through the distant trees. It seemed as though even the weather could see into my guilty heart and growled at me in judgment. I couldn't raise my eyes to Mark's, a sudden jolt of embarrassing memory coursing through me at the things he'd said last year, and how they hurt to think about now. "You're really talented. You're coming back next year, right? You're 1 in a million, Madison Cromwell." "Cool." Mark shuffled his feet and rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, it was good to see you. Drive safe, Maddie." I couldn't hide my flinch this time, and realized I'd effectively shut down the conversation by not talking more. "You don't have to. I mean, no, it's fine. I have to lock up the sign-in office anyway." He held up his hands in friendly disengagement, but I could sense the wounds behind Mark's expression. I'd rejected him. He'd gotten over me, and now I was ghosting him in person like some toxic social media troll. I should have just driven away. My mouth opened, though I had no idea what I was going to say, since my self-hating musings blocked any constructive sentences. Boom. Mark and I both almost jumped out of our skins, and I glanced up to see the sky above royal with pitch-black clouds, flickers of lightning snaking in between. The weather hadn't called for rain, much less what looked to be a thunderstorm of seismic proportions. Inky black clouds smothered the stars. A colder, harsher breeze caught the wind, and I shivered under my green ripstop jacket. It was as if some gargantuan black beast had sprung out of nowhere and devoured the beautiful night from before. "Whoa!" I blurted at a few icy raindrops that began to plink down around me. "Where did that come from?" Mark didn't speak. I swiveled my head to repeat my question. The question faded from my mind, and instead, I felt my skin crawl. His dark eyes were fixed on the sky, and I saw something in Mark's gaze that I'd never seen before. Deep, abysmal fear. "Mark?" I rasped out, wondering if I should call my dad and ask him to come get me with his big four-wheel drive truck. Mark's jaw worked, and his Adam's apple floated up and down with each nervous swallow. "Which way do you usually go home?" Acidic worry wriggled through my veins, and I pointed in the same direction as where the storm originated. "I take High Road on to Bethesda Ridge, and straight from there to 142. "Don't tonight." His tone turned cold and sharp, like a man who stood face to face with something he either hated or feared. "Go back to Collingswood and take 85 to the interstate. It's not safe any other way." Mark had served 6 years in the Army before coming to New Wilderness, and to see him this rigid, coiled like a spring, made me temporarily forget about my internal pity party over our unfortunate past. Okay, I'll go that way. He caught my eye and placed a white-knuckled hand on the open driver's door. Do not take shortcuts. Do not try to go to the old route. Do not stop. Not for anything or anyone. If worse comes to worse, you backtrack here and lock yourself inside the administration building. He acts like there's a tornado coming. Okay, I squeaked, unable to muster much else. Mark's sternness frightened me. I mean it, Maddie. I don't care who they are, what they do. Do not stop. Not for a soul. Period. A long bolt of silvery lightning streaked through the air, and the resounding boom that echoed off it shook the ground beneath my feet. I'd grown up in a town a half an hour north of the park, and had never seen a storm like this, even in tornado season. Something about how fast the clouds gobbled up the sky, the way the lightning shrieked with venomous glee, gave the storm an almost sentient quality, like it waited for us to venture out onto the long gravel roads that surrounded the isolated reserve so it could pounce. What's going on? I finally managed to meet his eyes, raw fear overpowering my facade. Mark, is everything okay? He walked around the open car door and placed both hands on my shoulders in a gentle touch that sent pangs of guilt rippling deep into my chest. Mark tried to smile, but another lightning strike lit up his thin face, and I saw the lines there, the desperations, like a man with no cards left in a losing poker game. Go home, Maddie, as fast as you can, and if you see a road sign for Tauerpin Road, spelled Tauerpin, do not take it. Do you understand me? Not really. My mind whirled with 1,000 confused questions, but the way Mark held me by my shoulders, gave me a small squeeze as though we were saying goodbye forever, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. What was going on? I had never seen him get this way about a storm. Not once in the dozens of times I've driven around New Wilderness had I ever seen a sign for Tauerpin Road. I wanted to believe Mark was messing with me, perhaps getting a form of warped revenge for my rejection, but the storm swamped the night sky above us and turned the pleasant mid-fall evening into a dark, rainy hellscape. I slid into my driver's seat and exhaled in thanks the moment my car's decrepit engine roared to life. Mark leaned through the open car window to be face level with me one last time. Remember, do not take a Tauerpin Road, not for any reason. Turn around and come back if you have to. Gripping my cracked steering wheel, I forced myself to hold his gaze, even though it made my jumbled emotions do somersaults in my head. You're going to be okay, right? Through the murky darkness, that same bright smile split the night, though a morose gleam overshadowed Mark's usually cheerful eyes. I'll be fine. Text me when you get home, okay? Just so I know you're not stuck out there. And with that, he jogged away to his SUV, casting furtive glances at the storm overhead as the rain started to pour down around him. Part of me wanted to run after Mark, to hop into the passenger seat next to him and refuse to leave until he told me what was happening. But I knew I couldn't do that. Dad and Mom were waiting on me. The storm was getting worse by the second, and I didn't want to make Mark worry. Nor did I want to give him any wrong ideas about my feelings toward him. Especially not now. He's finally happy. Everything's back to normal, sort of. He's got some lucky girl, and I have my friends back. That's all that matters. The road home became a long ebony ribbon of shallow potholes, which my little car rattled over one by one with a malcontent rumble. Wind roared outside my rain-streaked windows, and I could feel the power of the storm pushing my car with each heavy gust. Rivulets of water turned the windshield into an optical illusion, my vision ahead smeared and hazy, the ragged wiper blades running at full speed. All the ditches brimmed with muddy runoff water, streams flowed over the gravel roadway, and more water surged down from the surrounding banks. Thunder crackled like a war zone right over my head, and even though I sat in my nice dry car, I still hunched over every time a boom went off in reflex, like a wild animal. Lightning bolts lit up the night sky in flashbulb eruptions, making everything seem to move in slow motion. Whoomp! I screamed and yanked hard on the steering wheel. All 4 tires skipped over the wet gravel in an uncontrolled slide, and the vehicle careened toward the nearest ditch. My heart stopped in my chest. I mashed the brake pedal to the floor, and the hunk of rogue metal ground to a stop, mere inches from flying off the road. Holy cow! I breathed, my arms and legs shaking, too stunned to be angry or afraid. A huge telephone pole lay across the road, completely blocking it, and another lay further down the tarmac in the same fashion, both fried black by the powerful lightning. Their long gray cables snaked over the wet pavement in between them, a deadly labyrinth of runaway voltage that would zap me if I tried to walk across. Not that I would even think of being that stupid. Slumping back in the seat, I closed my eyes and focused on slowing my heart rate. I'd come a few microseconds from smashing headfirst into the pole, and if I had, there would be no way of getting myself out of such a mess. I need to turn around. I tried to talk myself into a calmer state as the rain hammered on my tiny blue sedan, my adrenaline at all-time highs. Can't go that way. Maybe I can find a side road and... A sliver of jade green caught my eye, and the thought left my mind. On the other side of the road, a lone, dented road sign stood in the weeds and briars, its white borders rusted. The green of the sign faded to near illegibility, but even from where I sat, there was no mistaking the words that glared back at me in the yellowish beam of my headlights. Tauerpin Road. An ice-cold shiver ran down my spine. Goosebumps scattered over my arms beneath my jacket, and I gulped back a gasp. I hadn't deviated from the route Mark had told me to take. I had followed his instructions to the letter, and I had taken this way a few times before, always in the daytime. Never, not once, had I seen this sign. Beyond the glow of my headlights, I could discern a narrow gravel road that stretched far off into the darkness between the trees, peppered with rain so that it almost appeared jet black in the night. Unlike most of the roads in this area, this one seemed to be arrow straight, like a deep gullet of shadows that threatened to swallow me whole. Nope. I shook my head out of my stupor and reached for the gear shift knob. I never thought of myself as the prettiest, fastest, or even smartest girl in town, but I knew enough to stay away from sketchy areas, and this one beat them all. Blocked road or not, with the way Mark talked about it, there was no way I was taking my car down there. I'd head back, park in front of the administration building, and wait for the storm to blow over. Even if I had to be stranded at New Wilderness for the night, I figured it would be way safer than driving on roads with trees and telephone poles blown down all over the place. Clank! My bumper hit something, and the back of my head smacked off my headrest. I blinked at myself in my rearview mirror with confusion. What did I hit? Nothing sat in the road behind me, no other vehicles, nothing but wet roadway and... Seriously? My eyes stared into my mirror with disbelief. A third telephone pole draped across the road, cutting me off from my one and only escape route. It was impossible, simply impossible, that lightning had struck all 3 in a perfect row. But there it was. I couldn't drive around it. The ground outside of the gravel road had turned to muck, and the ditches were practically medieval moats. Moving the hefty poles by myself was out of the question, and my little car didn't have the guts to drag or push them out of the way. I couldn't walk, not in this storm, with the wind bringing the temperature down to a nasty 40 degrees at minimum. Besides, my town lay another 30 miles to the north, and the road ahead was covered in downed electrical wires. Even if I tiptoed around them, I'd be stumbling along the dark road by myself, wearing thin khaki work pants and a lightweight jacket that would never turn the rain. Flagging down a car would require one coming by, and with how bad this storm was, I didn't figure that would happen anytime soon. I pulled my phone out and tapped the screen. My heart sank at the empty triangle in the upper right-hand corner, a little X through the bottom of it. No service. Of course I've got no service. Oh, Dad's gonna freak. Swallowing the dryness that attempted to choke me, I put the car into park and sighed. I'd just have to wait here until the storm passed. At least I had protection from the elements and a barrier between myself and the menacing night. I could sleep till morning, run my heater, and play some music to keep boredom away. Maybe if Mark got concerned, he'd track me down, give me a ride back to New Wilderness. Come to think of it, Dad would eventually come out to search for me too, and between the two of them, there was no way they could miss me. All I had to do was sit tight, and I'd be out of this jam by sunup. Satisfied with my plan, I clicked my seat back into a slight recline and started to scroll through the pictures on my phone, reliving all the fond memories I'd made this year. One by one, they glided past my gaze to reflect on the glass window beside me, a ticker-tape parade of sunshine and fun. Me petting a giraffe in the giraffe barn. Me, my best friend Kendra Smith, and a few other girls washing windows at the rental cabin. Me and several others at the company picnic, where our goofy team had taken third place in a karaoke competition. Right after they gave us our trophy, Mark complimented my singing, and Kendra said I should date him, literally within earshot of the poor guy. Cringing at how the memory stabbed at my guilt-ridden heart, I reached to turn on the radio as a distraction from the uncomfortable reality of my choices. Something moved in the corner of my eye. I sat bolt upright and snapped my head around to the left. Not far away on the other side of the road stood Kendra. Her khaki pants and short brown braid were dripping, her lips tinged a shade of light blue from the horrid wind. Kendra's drenched black uniform shirt stuck to her slender frame, moving in jerky rhythm with each breath, and she hugged her arms around herself in a desperate attempt to ward off the cold. I stared, confused. How was she here? I hadn't seen any other cars pull up, no lights or horns. In fact, I couldn't see Kendra's green Kia anywhere. Had she foolishly decided to walk for help instead of staying in her own car? She must have left around the same time and got stranded too. Seeing me staring, Kendra made a sheepish smile. Kendra, I waved at her from behind the glass of my driver's door. Kendra, hop in. Come on, it's warmer in here. The rain pounded on the car roof harder, and Kendra hunched against the watery onslaught, as though each drop was an ice pick to her exposed skin. She pointed to her ear and mouthed a reply. Can't hear you. It occurred to me that with the dull roar of the rain, there was no way she could hear me from inside my locked car all the way across the road. Instead, I beckoned her closer, made blatant motions, and half shouted with exaggerated movements. Come on, Kendra, come here. Kendra just shook harder with a fresh gust of cold and waved for me to come to her, like she had some intimate secret she didn't want to shout in front of the lonely dark trees. You've got to be kidding me. Whatever it is, you can tell me in the car. Ugh, I better not get pneumonia for some stupid gossip, Kendra. Frustrated but still concerned, I slid my hand toward my door handle. Lightning peeled through the sky, and in the dark trees behind Kendra, I glimpsed movement. Seconds slow to what felt like hours, and I blinked up at the thing that hid in the forest in mute panic. It was tall, easily the same height as the surrounding pines, with a thin body that resembled a gnarled tree trunk without leaves or branches. In the spasmodic light of the storm, I couldn't see its face, just a rounded, bulbous head wreathed in shadow, and spindly arms that hung to where its knees would have risen to. My mouth fell open in shock, and I pointed a trembling finger, unable to so much as shout a warning. Kendra turned, just in time for a huge gray hand with 4 fingers to shoot out of the tree line and snatch her up like a rag doll. Her head whipped around. Kendra's mouth fell open in a terrified scream, one that I heard even inside my car. "Oh no!" Kendra's shriek cut off the second the massive gray arm jerked back into the trees, and another deep rumble of thunder echoed through the night, almost reminding me of throaty laughter. "Kendra!" My clumsy fingers fumbled with the car door handle, my heart racing a million miles a minute. Without a second thought about the cold, I lunged out of the open door and snagged my foot on the loose seatbelt to fall face first in the wet gravel. Pain stung in my right palm, but I pushed myself up and dashed toward the road junction, past the battered sign for Tauerpin Road. Wind slashed at my face, pulled my hair from its ponytail, and cold rain drained down the back of my jacket with sadistic glee. Muddy gravel squelched under my tennis shoes, and shadows closed in around me as I outran the golden beams of my car headlights. Both lungs burned with the moisture-filled air, and I squinted against the inky darkness. Wham! I flew headlong into the rough stones of the road, my shins flaring with pain. Little sharp bits of rock stuck into my bare hands, and I gritted my teeth to choke back a string of expletives. Ow! Son of a... Sitting up, I picked at my hands to dislodge the pesky rocks and ran careful fingers over my legs. They were sore, but I hadn't fallen hard enough to break or sprain anything. I decided that I must have tripped over a fallen tree branch in the dark, my own hands barely visible before my dirt-smeared face. Blind as a bat in the dark, I groped for my phone. "Oh, Madison, you idiot!" I remembered too late that my phone sat in my car's center console, still on the picture of me and my teammates at the company picnic. 10 clammy fingers searched the pockets of my thin jacket frantically, but all I could find was the crinkled wrapper of a candy bar I'd eaten earlier today. My panic began to mount even more, until my thumb bumped something smooth and cool to the touch. "Mima, you're the best," I chuckled, and pulled out a little red pin light my grandma had gotten me for a Christmas stocking stuffer. It clicked on with a comforting bright blue glow, though the beam didn't let me see very far around me. Looking back the way I'd come, I spotted a downed tree branch and rubbed my shins again in spite. Man, that had hurt. Lightning illuminated the road for a split second, and it occurred to me that I couldn't see my car from where I sat. In fact, I couldn't even make out the aura of my car's headlights. It was as if they'd fallen off the face of the earth. How far did I run? I'm still on the road, and it was like 30 seconds. I left it running. Maybe the battery died? But that didn't make any sense. My dad taught me enough about cars to know that if the engine was running, it should be charging the battery with the alternator. Besides, my car's battery was only a year old. I remembered paying for a new one last year. So where did the lights go? An uneasy sensation rippled through my stomach, and I rubbed at my arms for heat. All around, the trees swayed in the high wind. Lightning slithered across the sky, followed by waves of cannon-like thunder. My toes were going numb in my soggy sneakers, and I swallowed a bitter lump of regret. Whatever grabbed Kendra could be anywhere, and outside of my little car, in the pouring rain, I felt as exposed as if I had come to work naked. My mind flashed back to the little revolver my father had bought for me a month ago, one he insisted I carry everywhere, only for me to roll my eyes and leave it in my nightstand drawer. Dad had always been protective, particularly since I was the eldest daughter, and I chaffed at how he'd made me text him every time I came and went from work. Sitting on the wet ground, my shins throbbing, with nothing but my tiny pin light to ward off the darkness, I cursed myself for all the times I'd shrugged him off as being too paranoid. "Dad, I wish you were here." Crunch, crunch, crunch. I spun around at the sound of shoes on loose stones, and the beam of my flashlight landed on a familiar khaki-wearing figure. Shocked, I stood up. "Kendra?" She stopped several yards away, far enough that the weak beam of my pin light couldn't fully reveal her features. Something in the pit of my guts churned, like I'd eaten spoiled food, and I took a cautious step forward. "Kendra? Jeez, you okay? I saw that thing grab you. What was—" My limbs froze, and the words died in my throat at a sudden realization. Every morning, I checked the work roster to see where I'd be working and who I'd be working with. Mainly, I wanted to know ahead of time if I was working with any newcomers so I could know their names, but ever since the incident with Mark, I also did it to be sure I had a fair warning if he'd be anywhere nearby. Kendra and I were really close, and she always texted me whenever we were set to work together, usually a long string of happy emojis. I was certain she hadn't been on the roster at all today. My heart thudded against my ribs, and both hands turned slick with sweat. In the faint glow of my light, I could just begin to make out the contours of Kendra's pale face. She was smiling. Wide. Far too wide. I took a step back. Kendra lunged forward, letting out a croaking screech that rang in my ears. Reacting too slow, I raised my arms to protect myself and locked eyes with her. Kendra's eyes were a flood of off-white, as if they rolled into the back of her head, and her mouth hung open in a gape that couldn't be normal for how wide it was. Her teeth were squared off and stubby, almost like they'd been carved in some weird woodcraft festival, and yet she grinned in a stiff way that made my blood run cold. Like a rabid dog, she hurled herself into me, and we both went flying to the ground. I would have screamed, but the blow knocked the wind out of me, Kendra straddling my chest and pinning me with her weight. Desperate to escape, I squirmed to prevent her manic fingers from reaching my face, as she seemed intent on clawing my eyes out. Her skin was cold as ice and surprisingly hard, dense like a chair leg. My feeble jabs didn't seem to have any impact, and it felt like I was punching a wall. All the while, Kendra's bizarre jaws snapped inches from my face, her fetid breath blasting me with a stench of rot. She grabbed both my wrists with her vice-like grip, and I felt my energy slipping away, my strength gone, sapped by unforgiving fear. "No, no, no!" Gaining the upper hand, she held my arms down, and I couldn't stop the panic, sobbing and writhing in the mud. Something in the way Kendra grinned at me in malicious animalistic joy told me that my fate would not only be painful, but slow, and that death should be the least of my worries. My mind flashed to my dad's smile, my mom's warm hugs, to my sister and brother, to my own cozy room covered in movie posters and Skyrim art. I wanted nothing more than to see them again, to get back in my car and drive home, to wake up from this horrible nightmare I'd somehow fallen into. In the last few moments, I pictured Mark's soft brown eyes, his debonair smile, and the way he warned me with fear heavy in his voice. "Text me when you get home, okay?" I squeezed my eyes shut and turned my face to the muck as Kendra's lukewarm breath hissed in my ear, ready for her to rip into me like a juicy steak. Whack! The crack of wood on wood pierced the air above my face, and Kendra wrenched backward, something coarse and wet splattering over my face. At last I screamed, still paralyzed by fear, afraid to open my eyes. Kendra's bulk slid off me, and more footsteps bounded up next to my head. A few more loud cracks echoed, as if a 2x4 had been smashed against the wall repeatedly. Something grabbed the back of my jacket collar and started to pull me down the road, oblivious to my frightened hyperventilation. Thunder roared, and even through my closed eyelids, I could see a monstrous shadow framed against the bright lightning nearby, standing over the road. "It's got me!" My arms came back to life, and I thrashed, kicked, and screamed with all my might, like my mother had told me to do if someone ever tried to drag me into their van. I wanted to go home. I wanted to live, and even if it meant biting and clawing my way out, I would do it. Whatever had hold of my jacket let go, and my eyes flew open so I could make a run for it. "Stop!" A hand clamped over my mouth, while an arm wound around my chest to yank me off the road and deep into the murky brush. "You want to get us both killed?" "Wait, what?" Both legs went limp the instant that voice jerked me from my panic. Could it be? "Mar?" I muttered into the calloused hand over my mouth. My captor tensed, and more whispered words tickled my right ear. "Stay still. It's close." I didn't have time to protest. On the opposite side of the road, a tall, lumbering figure moved through the trees in long, slow strides, its head swaying slowly back and forth, as if searching for something. Each step the being took made the ground shake, small tremors moving up from the mud into my chest, as if a steel mill were right beside me. One hand swung freely at its side like a person out for a walk, while the other held on to a long mass of what looked like black strands draped over its pebble gray shoulder, attached to a load that I couldn't see from where I sat. I still couldn't make out its face, so high up and shrouded in darkness was it, and while it had arms, legs, and a body like a person, I somehow knew in the depths of my frightened mind that this thing was far from natural. The massive creature wandered on down the road, letting out long, loud bellows at random intervals that sounded kind of like beluga whale calls, the eerie siren song making my head swim. As soon as it trailed out of sight, a dark form shifted in front of me, and a newfound panic rose in my throat at the shove of someone pushing me hard against a rock so I couldn't wriggle free. Red light filled my field of vision, and I slammed my eyes shut in confusion at the glow that hovered over my face. The hand left my mouth at last, only to return with the cold sensation of a knife blade pressed to my neck. Again, a low voice hissed through the dark. "Say your name." "What did I do? I don't understand. What did I do to deserve this?" I choked down a whimper and tried to stay calm. "Please, I said, say your name." The shadow with Mark's voice snarled in a vicious tone I'd never heard him take with anyone before. My skin prickled, and I had never felt more helpless than in that moment. I'd always trusted Mark, and never in my wildest nightmares would I have thought of him hurting me. Now I was at his mercy, and I thought with bitter remorse of my rejection and how he might seek vengeance for it. "Madison!" I squeaked, praying it was really him and that somehow he'd let me go. "Mark, please don't." "What kind of cupcakes do you make?" The knife didn't move, and I felt it brush my skin as I swallowed nervously. Strawberry upside down." There was a long, terrifying pause. The knife left my throat, and the figure pulled me up from the cold rock he had me pinned to. Two arms wove around me and held me close, so close that I could smell the mint aftershave on his neck and burned cordite on his gray jacket. He tucked the open folds of his coat around my shoulders to surround me in warmth, his dry uniform shirt soaking up the rainwater from mine. The harshness vanished like melted snow, and a tenderness radiated through his embrace that made everything seem a little less dark. "What are you doing here, Maddie?" At the sound of my name, I wound my hands up in the cloth of Mark's shirt and pressed my face to his collar in relief. My car, I got stuck. Kendra." "Yeah, I know." Mark rubbed my back between both tense shoulder blades, his touch comforting. "It wasn't her." With my face buried in his cozy jacket lapels, I fought tears that brimmed in my eyes, too afraid to be embarrassed. "What's going on?" Another roll of thunder growled overhead, and somewhere off in the woods, a shriek echoed into the night. "We have to go." Mark slid his arms under my armpits and hauled me to my feet. "It's not safe here." But I clung to him, refused to let go, too cold and scared to leave the heated sanctuary of his coat. "What's going on, Mark? What was that thing? Why did she... Mark clicked his flashlight on and held it so I could see his face. In the red beam, Mark's brown eyes appeared black, his face grim, and there were scratches on his right cheek as if someone had dug their fingernails in his skin. "Maddie, I need you to trust me, all right? I'll explain once we have some breathing room. Now come on." Every instinct I had wanted to refuse, to beg him to run back with me to my waiting car so I could speed home to my warm house. I just wanted this nightmare to end, yet something primal inside my guts told me that I wouldn't get 10 feet without Mark. Like it or not, I needed him, and he seemed bound and determined to plunge deeper into the forest surrounding that cursed road. Another cold gust of wind raked its cruel tendrils over my face, and I shivered. "Okay." Mark grabbed my hand, and without a word, led me deeper into the darkness. My shoes slid on the mud, thorns stuck into my thin coat, and the rain continued to sap me of whatever body heat I had left. Still, I never let go of his hand, for fear this strange labyrinth would swallow him like it had my old beater and leave me at the mercy of whatever other apparitions were out there. My fate was sealed now, my survival entwined with Mark's, and I followed him blindly through the abyss, hoping with every step that he had some plan to get me out of Tauerpin Road. It's so surreal, seeing the events of my life put to words, especially on a far-flung corner of the internet. I must admit, I thought it would be difficult to make myself relive the terrible night that changed my life forever. But after posting the first segment, I realized how wrong I was. This isn't difficult. It's excruciating. Even as I type this, a deep pain rips at my heart without mercy. The memories hurt. They sear my emotions and tear my soul. Yet I know I have to go on to gain some form of closure. The world has to know what happened. They have to know the truth. After the incident on the road, Mark and I walked for the better part of 10 minutes before a tall, bulky shape loomed out of the blackness. At first I recoiled, thinking it was the creature, but Mark shone his flashlight at it and revealed a rusty collection drum, the kind used by oil derricks in our rural area for decades. This one appeared to be derelict, and when Mark climbed the rickety metal steps to tug open the top hatch, it confirmed my suspicions. "Come on, it's drier inside." Mark swept his red flashlight beam over the nearby trees, as if to scan for anyone following us. I stuck my feet into the tank and found another ladder hidden just beneath the rim of the hatch. Mark climbed down after me and swung the hatch shut, sliding a thick metal pipe in place as a sort of deadbolt. The soft click of the big lighter hissed through the dark and filled the room with cheerful yellow light. Across from the base of the ladder, a dented kerosene lantern sat atop a dusty old folding table, the tiny golden flame contained in its glass orb. Under my feet, the floor lay covered in sections of broken wood pallets, with the metal base of the oil drum still coated in a sheen of congealed grease beneath them. The air smelled of wood rot, crude oil, and mildew, with a dull staccato of rain drumming on the outside of our little steel fortress all the while. Crates and various cardboard boxes were stacked against the curved wall of the oil tank, and against one side there stood a ragged cot, with a few wool blankets scattered over it. On the cot, I noticed a newer-looking gray rucksack, a green canvas shoulder bag, and a red nylon duffel bag. Mark flicked his flashlight off and set it on the table. Now that I could see him better, he looked worse than before, his clothes torn in places, both boots caked in mud. A half-dozen black smeary handprints dotted his jacket sleeves, and something told me they weren't his. He had a well-worn 12-gauge shotgun slung over one shoulder, another flashlight duct-taped to its wooden foregrip, and an old-fashioned baseball bat hung from a crude sling on his back, its wood grain coated in more of the strange black stuff from his coat. He turned to me. Mark's eyes took in my pitiful appearance. "You okay?"
How am I supposed to answer that?
In some ways, I felt numb, too rattled by what had just happened to think. But I knew if my father were here, he'd want me to be tough, brave, and I couldn't let my nerves get the best of me now.
I'm fine, I think. Just cold.
Mark shrugged off his coat and draped it over my shoulders before slipping one hand under my chin to examine my face. "Well, looks like you lucked out. You got splattered pretty good, but doesn't look like the puppet got its claws into you." I frowned, even as he guided me to the cot and sat me down.
Puppet?
Uh-huh. Mark's expression darkened somewhat, and he rummaged through his rucksack to produce a small packet of wet wipes. The ones that look like people. We call them puppets, because the big one uses them like hunting dogs to track you down.
What the?
My stare must have unnerved him, because Mark sighed, started to carefully dab at my face with a wipe. "It's a long story. I told you to stay away, Maddie. Why didn't you listen to me?" Indignant, I crossed my arms over my soggy shirt.
I tried. A bunch of poles fell and blocked the road. Then Kendra appeared out of nowhere and that thing grabbed her.
"So you just ran in?" I narrowed my eyes at him, annoyed at the critical tone in Mark's voice and how much it reminded me of my father's numerous security lectures.
I wanted to save my friend.
Except she was never there. Mark held up the wet wipe so I could see what he'd cleaned off my face in the lamplight. Even after all the strange events of the night thus far, I'd half expected to see dark red blood, but instead I blinked in confusion at black, algae-like sludge mixed with what looked like bits of wood splinters.
Is that?
Yep. Mark nodded and continued to check me over like some army medic from his old unit. That's what came out of her head. They're not flesh and bone like you and me. The puppets are made from rot and wood by the big one, so they bleed black, not red. That's one way of knowing if they're real or not.
Her teeth, they were wooden, like the rest of her. How was that possible? I don't understand.
Horrified, I looked down at my palms, scraped, bleeding, and muddy. I remembered how Kendra's skin felt hard under my fists.
She looked so real.
Mark handed me a small brown towel so I could dry my semi-frozen limbs off. They all do. Was Kendra with you? The real Kendra?
No.
I patted myself down, grateful to feel some of the heat return to my fingers.
I just looked up and she never said a word.
All at once, the events clicked together in my mind like puzzle pieces, and I sat straight up. Kendra hadn't spoken a word, only made a scream, one any frightened girl could make, and one easy to replicate without risk of being discovered. She hadn't run over to my car at my invitation like any normal person would. She hadn't called my name, because that thing wasn't Kendra. Mark caught my stunned, open-mouthed gasp, and his eyes moved to the hatch overhead as if to check for signs of someone listening. She was a lure, meant to get you deeper in, before the trap was sprung. The big one models all the puppets off of real-life people. Whatever it sees or catches, somehow it knew what Kendra looked like and made her to trick you.
The pictures on my phone. It could see them from the trees.
Another rapid-fire thought ran through my mind, dark and sinister, as I watched Mark kneel in front of me to inspect my bruised shins. Kendra had looked so real. Mark looked real now. Real and surprisingly calm.
So, what are you doing in here?
I tried to avoid looking at him, afraid of what I might see. My job. Mark nudged the shotgun over his shoulder with one elbow, still focused on checking me for wounds. Hunting the big one. I found another entrance near Bethesda Ridge and dropped my gear off here before going out to scout for a good ambush point. I set up a little blind near the road, then spotted your flashlight. I thought you were a puppet at first, but the other one tackled you, which saved you from getting your brains battered out. It just goes to show, you never know if someone's real until they're close. I edged backward onto the cot, my throat dry.
How else can you tell?
Hesitating, Mark frowned, as if remembering something he'd rather forget. You ask them questions they can't answer. Puppets imitate whatever knowledge they're fed, by voice, pictures, videos, all that. So if they use the wrong voice or can't answer very personal questions that only they would know, they're not real. Usually, the puppets are smart enough to know, though, and once they realize the jig is up, they'll go for your eyes first. Both of his dark irises rose to meet mine, and the air stuck in my lungs. Knowledge rested in those eyes, and he waited for me to react with tense patience. Mark knew that I knew, or rather didn't know for sure if he was in fact a walking nightmare disguised as my friend. All I could do now was ask and wait for his eyes to roll back into his head and his teeth to turn into pegs.
I have to know. I have to. I can't turn my back on him without being sure. So,
I balled one fist under the coat he'd put over my shoulders, ready to smash his face in the second Mark lunged for me.
What's my favorite color?
Thunder rolled outside. The wind howled. The trees cracked. Neither of us moved a muscle, both staring at the other. Mark's eyes searched my face, and I clenched my fist tighter, ready to swing with all my might. Teal. He spoke the words like they were honey on his lips, and let slide a fond, whimsical smile. Like the necklace your grandma got you for your 15th birthday. Now, you gonna break my nose, Maddie?
Thank God for those long conversations.
My face boiled with embarrassed heat, and I unclenched my fist to make a sheepish rub at my black and blue shin.
Sorry, I had to be sure.
Don't be sorry. Mark tinged crimson, as though he'd embarrassed himself, and tossed the filthy wipe into a gap in the crude pallet floor. I hated pulling a knife on you like that, but I didn't have a choice. Like you said, it's best to be sure. Relieved enough to be curious, I dared to shift to a more comfortable spot on the blankets and let my mind work.
So, what is this place? Why are those things out there?
Mark rose to his feet and pointed to the green canvas bag next to me on the cot. Get dressed, and I'll explain as we go. Everything in there should be dry, though you might have to mix and match to get a good fit. After all, I'm not exactly built like you.
As we've both noticed.
The last bit came with a characteristic toothy grin from Mark that made me flush, and he crossed to the other side of the cramped room to turn away from me. I left my wet brawn panties on, what with Mark being only 6 feet away at most, and with my scrambled brain still not sure about our friendship. His spare t-shirt fit somewhat snugly, and I pulled a hooded flannel jacket over it to avoid hearing my mother's stern rebuke in my head about what kind of man I wanted to attract, the good or the temporary. Luckily, the extra set of fleece-lined camouflage pants in the bag were loose enough that they weren't painted on, though I doubted they were baggy enough to have passed inspection. Regardless of the ill fit, it felt great to be back in warm, dry clothes, though they smelled like Mark's rustic cologne, something that made me both nervous and shy all at once.
For Pete's sake, Madison, they're just clothes. Get out of your head. This isn't the time or place for being flaky.
While I hurried to dress, Mark stood with both hands in his pockets, face to the wall. Last year, Randy took me out to the falconry station during a stormy night and warned me about Tauerpin Road. Of course, I didn't believe him, and when I spotted it on my 5th week, I went in like a moron. Luckily for me, he knew I was curious and came to get me. I guess it's been around since the 80s, when the land was given to the park by the old coal mining company that had it before. No one knows where it came from or how it got here, but, well, here it is.
How come you guys didn't let everyone else know?
I slid on a fresh pair of wool socks and wiggled my toes in pleasure at how soft they were on my cold feet.
You know, put up signs, roadblocks?
It's not that simple. Mark didn't risk turning to check and see if I was ready yet, but picked at some paint on the wall with his fingernail instead. I'd forgotten what a gentleman he could be, and it both made me smile and wince at the same time. It's not a regular road, Maddie. Not one you can just find whenever you want to. It's... how did Randy put it? It's like a door between our reality and somewhere else. A waypoint, I think he called it. Somehow, certain powerful storms can activate it and open up the road. Anyone or anything that goes in gets lost in the labyrinth and usually ends up as lunch for one of the critters in here. From what he told me, the big one gets a lot of the people. I shivered and remembered how the huge gray figure lurched through the trees with its whale call roars.
What are they?
Mark stayed quiet for a moment, but he scraped at the makeshift wooden floor with the toe of his boot. No one knows. Randy thinks they're aliens, but I don't buy it. There are all kinds of things left behind in here. Cars, trucks, clothes, gear, all without any trace of their owners. I think the big one changed them, made them into puppets to use like bait to catch more people. But there's more things in here than just them. I've seen deer without skin on their skulls, bears with armor plates made of bone, and flowers that can shoot poisonous needles. All of them will rip you to shreds in 10 seconds flat, and if you don't make it out by morning, you'll end up just like them. That's what happened to the guy who built this dump.
How do you know?
I swallowed hard and finished lacing up one grimy tennis shoe. At that, Mark finally did risk a glance back my way and turned red as a tomato to see me fully clothed. Our eyes locked and a shudder ran down my back. Not cold, but warm, tingly, and pleasant.
He does have really nice eyes. Kind of like chocolate. Geez, Madison, would you stop?
Terrified of the war within myself, I dropped my gaze back to my shoes and made a show of tying the other one. Mark jerked his head toward a lone empty chair near the rickety table. Randy found what was left of him propped up right there, with a gun in his hand and a bullet in his head. His upper half was still human, but from the waist down, well, let's just say he was probably in enough pain that he didn't feel the shot. I figured he wanted to go out on his own terms.
Yuck.
Determined to distract myself, I threw the chair a glance, grateful Mark had sat me down on the cot instead.
So I take it we can't just sit here and wait for the storm to pass?
Mark's grin of approval made him look more like my goofy friend and less like a weary old man in a young man's body. Spot on. Usually this place opens up at night, and by sunup, it's gone again. You can't just follow the road back out. It doesn't work that way. We have to find the exit before the sun rises without getting caught and killed. That's the easy part.
What's the hard part?
I stood and craned my neck back to try and comb the twigs out of my tangled auburn tresses. Mark's face drained of color, and he fiddled with the black rubber wristwatch on his arm, as if deep in thought. Let me worry about it, all right? You just focus on keeping your eyes peeled for anything that isn't one of us out there. He avoided my eyes this time, and something about it made me feel sick to my stomach. Mark had done that before at the parking lot. Kept the whole truth from me to protect me from a nightmare I couldn't even begin to imagine. I resented being treated like some porcelain doll that couldn't handle reality, but at the same time, part of me was too afraid to ask for it. My entire world had turned upside down in less than an hour, and all I wanted was to go home. And if that meant Mark never told me the full story of this awful place, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad trade.
I'm definitely never staying after dark, ever again.
Here, sorting various items between the gray rucksack and the green canvas bag, Mark handed me a headlamp with a bit of red plastic cellophane taped over the lenses and a small flashlight without it. The white light is in case we get attacked, or for shooting. The red lights we use to see when we're trying to be stealthy. Emphasis on the word trying.
Won't they see it?
I went back to wrestling with my messy hair and eyed the headlamp with doubt. He shook his head and thumbed another green plastic shotgun shell into the receiver of his 12 gauge. Not as easily. Red light's harder to see in the dark, and even these things aren't that good. My fingers caught in a stubborn clump of hair, and I bit back an outburst at my own clumsiness. Let me try. Mark set his gun down, and from the depths of his ruck, he produced a pink polymer hairbrush. Stunned, I opened my mouth to protest, but he stepped behind me, threaded his fingers into my hair, and started to untangle each ratty knot with unexpected patience. Something about his touch, so light and careful, made a lovely warmth flow through me from head to toe, and I forgot whatever I would have said to stop him. Stroke by practiced stroke, Mark passed the brush through my hair, its bristles massaging my scalp, and I breathed in a deep, slow sigh of contentment. Wow. I'm not pulling too hard, am I? He asked, as casual as if offering me sugar for my coffee.
No,
I whispered, glad I faced away from him so that Mark wouldn't see me blush in pleased confusion.
You're doing a good job, actually. Where did you learn to do that?
Mark chuckled, smooth, silky affection lacing his tone. Claire. She loves it when I brush her hair. This is one of her favorite ones. She gets all silly and drowsy every time, and it's cute, even if she doesn't think so.
He sounds so happy, like he's smiling with his words.
Some of the heat faded from my core, and I closed my eyes at the sick feeling that twisted in its place. This was a privilege reserved for someone else. Someone who, unlike me, had chosen to love this man when the opportunity arose, and thus won his adoration in return. Deep in my heart, I knew I shouldn't be there. I shouldn't have enjoyed Mark brushing my hair, and I shouldn't have been feeling so guilty over someone who I only saw as a friend.
And yet I agonize over him, as if I have a right to do so.
With the memory of my own decision in mind, I pressed my hands to my stomach to stem the churning sensation there, and secretly hated myself for how much I didn't want him to stop.
Congratulations, by the way. I never got around to...
It's fine, Maddie. I appreciate it anyway. His words didn't betray any hurt or pain, but held a kindness that only made the guilt harder to bear. Mark tugged my hair into a fairly passable braid and smoothed his palm over it when he was finished in a way that made my pulse flutter. I turned to face him, and we stared at each other wordlessly, the rain drumming on the oil tank in the background, while the wind growled in impotent fury against our rusty sanctuary.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Don't say it. Do you hate me?
I blurted the words out, too late to stop myself. His eyes widened, and my brain almost exploded in humiliation and panic.
What?
Mark cocked his head to one side, a look of confusion and alarm in his brown eyes. No, Maddie. Why would I ever hate you? Real physical pain slashed through me. My lungs seemed to constrict, and I dragged my eyes away from his to choke down an anxious breath. Because I said no. Again, silence cloaked the air, and I waited for a cold response. A damaged grimace, a sad condemnation for bringing up the dreaded past. How could I be so selfish? How could I keep doing this, wounding him over and over again? What was wrong with me? A hand rested on my upper arm and made me jump. I looked up to find him close, staring down into my eyes with a smile that drove some of the ache from my chest. All the pain in the world was worth gaining you as a friend. I have Claire now, and we're happy together. And that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't told me the truth. You mean more to me than you will ever know.
I just wish that was enough.
Deep inside, my heart writhed, and I nodded mainly to keep myself from tearing up. Mark was happy. He was kind, sweet, good, and here I was. What was I doing? Having second thoughts? No, that couldn't be. Not now. Not like this. Mark pulled his rucksack on and slung the red bag over his shoulders as well. He handed me the green canvas bag and held out a shiny black pistol. You've shot guns before with your dad, right? I took the handgun and weighed its heft in my hand, the stenciled 9mm on the slide standing out in the lantern light. How long had it been since I'd last gone to the range with Dad? If my memory served right, it had been several months ago. Then again, several months ago I had been simple friends with Mark and didn't bear the awful weight of my secret guilt every time I saw him. It seemed like a lifetime ago.
I can shoot.
My throat scratched with the dry words, but I buckled on the black nylon holster that sheathed the gun and pocketed the 2 extra magazines Mark slid my way. Good. Mark tucked a long black knife with a green scabbard into my belt and tapped one finger on the baseball bat over his shoulder. But try to avoid it if you can. Once you let off a shot, everything for miles around will know we're here, and then it's game on. Best thing you can do is take a club to them or stick them in the throat to stop the screaming. Worst case scenario, conserve your ammo and run like hell. You didn't run back there. I tried to make a coy smirk, but it ended up coming across as a shy, thin-lipped smile as I remembered the blow from his Louisville slugger that had saved my life. Mark's chocolate-brown irises bore into mine, and a cavalier grin crossed his face, despite the cold, the dark, and our horrible situation. No, I didn't. Now, stick close. Let's find that exit and get back to the admin building. Leaving the solid walls of the hideout felt like pulling against gravity, but I wasn't about to insist on staying there without Mark. I followed him back into the dense rainy forest, the hood of his flannel jacket pulled over my head, the beam of my red headlamp trembling over the mucky ground. Strange cries echoed through the woods, some like the bizarre roars of animals, others as macabre near-human wails, and the ground shook with the claps of booming thunder. In between lightning bolts, I could feel the faint footsteps of the big one in the mud beneath my battered sneakers. There seemed to be no end to the trees, as if the forest had swallowed the road, along with any clearings or fields the daylight might have revealed. Down! Mark stopped abruptly, and I almost ran face first into his rucksack. I did as he said, dropped to a crouch behind him in the tall grass and froze, moving only my eyes to peer into the dark ahead of us. Try as I might, I couldn't see anything. The red lights too dim, the rain too heavy, and I didn't dare speak out of turn in case I would draw attention to us. Up there. He pointed up into the pine trees around us. See him? My blood turned to ice the instant I tilted my head back.
Oh, man.
They dangled from every branch and swayed limp in the wind like dozens of hanged convicts on the end of the executioner's noose. There were men and women, old people and children, all suspended by thick gray vines that led from the backs of their heads and up into the treetops. Their hazy white eyes were open, but stared with a blank, empty gaze that made them seem more like life-size marionettes than humans, and their clothes hung in waterlogged rags around them.
Are those?
Mark stroked the safety on his 12-gauge with caution and leaned close enough to whisper into my ear. Puppets. All the ones the big one made to lure other people in before us. I think it stores them here to recharge or something. See the vines? They're like power cords, but made of plant stuff. Squinting, I could just make out the slight movements of the gray viney cords, how they pulsated like oversized rotted placentas and pumped God knows what into the backs of the puppet skulls. It made my stomach wriggle, but I couldn't gag for the tension lodged in my mind. Come on. Mark picked at my sleeve and crept forward with slow, wary steps. Just stay low, and they won't even notice we're here.
What?
I wanted to tell Mark that was the worst idea I had ever heard of, but he was already 5 yards ahead of me, and the thought of losing him in the dark was infinitely more terrifying than that cursed forest. Besides, he knew this ground better than I did, and at this rate, if he said to gargle peanut butter while doing a handstand, I'd do it. With my cold fingers glued to the pistol he'd given me, I padded after Mark into the horrid cathedral of bodies, while the wind screamed through the pines. Every leaf that crumbled under my shoe, every stick that snapped, seemed to echo like a cannon in my anxious ears. Puppets hung everywhere, at various heights, some 3 stories up, and some so close I had to duck to crawl under their dirt-encrusted feet. I fought the urge to whirl around, to be sure their eyes weren't trained on me, and matched each step Mark took with meticulous parity. The smell of rot was overwhelming no matter where I went, and I'd never wanted to vomit more than right then. Yet part of me wondered in macabre curiosity what it would be like to be caught up by those greasy gray vines, to feel the ends burrow into the back of my head, crack open my skull, and plunge deep into the folds of my brain. Would I be alive the entire time? Would I feel every creeping growth, every rip and tear of the invading tendrils until I became a prisoner in my own mind, with no control over my body? Or would I cease to be me the instant they stabbed into my cerebrum, thrown into black oblivion, never to see the light of day again? As Bruce, not 10 yards from me, groaned, and I looked up. Crunch! One massive gray leg plummeted through the canopy, and I dove out of the way, bits of broken branches and wet conifer needles tumbling around me. Mark and I backed into the damp trunk of a nearby tree and stared up at the enormous form in mute horror. The big one stood up on the suspended puppets with indifference to what lay around its bare feet, almost as if it hadn't spotted us. It didn't have toes like a human, but weird gnarled twists like root ends that poked out of its foot in every direction. Each massive 4-fingered hand had no fingernails, but jagged sprout-like points that grew from the fingertips and reminded me of twigs on leafless winter trees. I still couldn't see the face of the colossal menace, the darkness of the rainy night like a cloak to its features. Stopping in the midst of the stored puppets, the big one slid the odd bundle of vines from its shoulder. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. Please let this be a bad dream. But the dozens of figures that swung from the ends of all the strands were no dream. They grinned, wriggled, and waved to each other like kids on an amusement park ride, their milk-white eyes glowing in the dark. One by one, the gray giant plucked the individual puppets from the bundle and strung them up in the trees, the slimy veins snaking around their necks and burrowing into the backs of their wooden skulls. The puppets' eyes dimmed, the smiles faded, and their dense limbs went limp, like a mutated nursery filled with mindless sleeping children. The big one held up the last puppet in its gargantuan palm and poked at it with an almost confused manner. From the ground, I could see the familiar shock of brown along with the puppet's half-mutilated wooden head. Low bellowing coos rumbled from the big one, and for some reason they reminded me of a sad murmur, as if the monstrosity couldn't understand why such a thing had been done to its creation. Mark's tap on my shoulder sent a river of panic through me before I realized it was him, and he pointed onward, into the thick undergrowth. Let's go, while it's changing out its hounds. Above, the big one let out a mournful bellow and cupped the ruined puppet to its chest with both massive hands. I ducked after Mark, and we scrambled into the maze of briars like rabbits fleeing the wolf, the thunder loud enough to hopefully mask our escape. Fresh rain met my face the instant we stepped out onto the road, and Mark clicked his red light back on, breathing a sigh of relief. Like taking a stroll in the park. He grinned back, and despite my riveting fear, another smile stretched across my face as well.
Well, maybe a park for the insane. Did you see the way it acted about the Kendra one? Almost like it was upset.
Mark took on a hateful glare, one he directed at the moisture-clogged forest behind us. It's not used to losing one of its precious pets. That thing's probably killed more good men than we know. The sooner it runs out of freaks to chase us with, the better.
I couldn't agree more.
We spent the next 15 minutes jogging down the side of the road, our eyes peeled for signs of movement. The rain seemed to have a will of its own and doused us without mercy, while the wind worked to freeze whatever we got wet. My teeth chattered, and Mark's shoulders hunched in a repeated shiver that told me he too neared a hypothermic state. This couldn't go on much longer, yet the Horde Road showed no sign of ending, stretched on and on into the dark, without bend or turn. On my left, something tall and square rose out of the curtains of falling raindrops. My heart skipped a beat, and I pulled on the back of Mark's rucksack, my fingers numb, my lips stiff.
Look, you see that, right? Is that a building?
He swayed to a stop, a harsh round of shakes racking his body, but I caught the renewed gleam in Mark's eyes. Oh, thank God. I was afraid we were gonna make it.
Wait.
I wanted to smile with hope, but my face moved like old rubber in the frigid rain.
Is that our way out?
Mark opened his mouth to speak, but as he turned my way, his already pale cheeks turned sheet white. A hushed croak from behind me made my blood turn to ice. I spun on my heel in time to see a dark form lunge from the shadows, its peg-toothed mouth gaped wide, a loud shriek piercing the air from her fetid lungs. How long the puppet had been trailing us for, I didn't know, but she closed the distance so fast that my hand didn't even have time to reach my pistol. Bang! Mark's shotgun roared with concussive force, and the puppet went flying into the waterlogged drainage ditch, her legs and arms kicking in the throes of death. Like ripples on a lake, the echo of the gunshot rattled into the trees, followed by an unnerving calm. My ears rang, but not enough to disguise every other sound falling silent. Mark and I shared a dread-filled grimace. The entire world held its breath, like we'd broken some sacred, unspoken rule.
Maybe the lightning covered it?
On cue, the entire forest we'd left behind lit up with a chorus of blood-curdling screams, and even from far away, I could make out the crash of bodies falling through the branches to the soggy forest floor, only to throw themselves through the underbrush at breakneck speed. I'd been wrong before, I realized, the tidal wave of screeches sinking through me with cold despair. There weren't dozens of them suspended in the trees. There were hundreds. Run! Mark hauled me by the canvas strap of my shoulder bag, but he didn't have to insist. I ran headlong after him up the bank on the other side of the road, our shoes slipping on the wet grass. Demented screams came from every direction. The thrash of puppets permeated the woods, and their feet rang on the gravel road in haphazard drum beats. They were everywhere, running out of the forest, crawling through ditches, dropping from branches, all to home in on our botting red lights with wide maniacal grins. My sides ached. The green canvas bag bounced off the small of my back with every step, and the rain stung my eyes. Both lungs felt ready to pop, and my legs grew heavier by the second. The fatigue from standing in a hot kitchen all day came back with a vengeance, and I realized I hadn't eaten or drank anything since lunch. My energy reserves depleted.
They're going to catch us. They're going to catch us. We can't run forever. Oh, Dad, Mom, I'm sorry.
Lightning cracked through the sky, and I almost tumbled down the opposite side of the bank, chest-high grass rushing up to meet me. Mark caught the hood of my coat and yanked me to my feet, his shout almost drowned out by the furious booms of the storm overhead. Stick with me! Come on! The closer we got, the clearer the enormous outline became. From the look of the dark, rectangular structure nestled in the midst of the grassy marsh, It had once been part of the coal mining apparatus of the early 1960s, a gargantuan concrete and steel structure with a high square tower that stretched out over a set of overgrown train tracks. A large sheet metal building branched off from the base of the tower and ran down into a slag yard surrounded by brush and tangled fencing. In one section, the fence had been toppled over by time and rust, leaving a gap the size of a pickup truck. My legs were almost numb, but I threw myself toward the gap, the shrieks of the puppets right behind me. Mark's shotgun barked once more, and I turned to see where he was. He lay in the trampled grass only a few yards back, having tripped on a hidden log. Mark reacted in time to roll over and bring his shotgun to bear on the closest puppet, taking its head off with a blast, but more bore down on him from every direction. In seconds, he'd be swamped. I stopped, my muscles twitching in protest, and the world slowed to a crawl. Mark was my friend. He'd saved my life. He'd asked me to dinner once, told me I was beautiful once, and forgave me when I couldn't do the same. Yet, in that awful moment, a thought crossed my mind. What if I didn't go back for him? Would the dread go away? Those tense moments at work? The job I loved? Where my bright, cheerful day dimmed with muted embarrassment and panic at seeing Mark across the parking lot? Would they dissipate? Would the confusing, sickening, anxiety-inducing stream of jumbled thoughts in my head fade if he wasn't there to stir them up? If Mark wasn't there to smile in the warm way he did, or say my name with a gentle voice that gave me butterflies in my stomach, could I find a way to go back to normal at last? I wouldn't have to endure hearing about Claire, seeing a ring on Mark's finger, or get social media notifications of the two of them on their honeymoon. I wouldn't have to face an uncertain future alone, with the knowledge that it all could have been different. I could avoid all of it, right this second. All I had to do was leave. Mark shot another incoming puppet, but the one behind it closed the distance before he could rack another slug into the gun's chamber and leapt onto his torso. Its frothy, peg-toothed jaws snapped at Mark's exposed throat, and he struggled to hold the freak back with his shotgun, both arms trembling with exhaustion. "Maddie!" he yelled, the storm doing its best to carry Mark's voice away. "Maddie, run!" I could run, and he wouldn't even curse my name. He's not selfish. Not like me. Anger flared inside me like a torch, a deep, seething rage unlike anything I'd experienced before. I brought up the pistol Mark had given me, both arms shaking with the cold rain, and staggered back his way. Bang, bang, bang. The pistol danced in my hands, spitting shiny brass casings into the gloom of night. Another puppet tumbled to the ground, and it gave me enough room to reach the one astride Mark's chest. "Get off!" I drew the knife from my belt and brought it down as hard as I could into the back of the puppet's head. It reared back, but I had hold of the creature's collar and ripped the knife free to drive it again and again into the wooden head, my fingers stinging with the exertion. Splinters and pitch-black goo coated my face, but I couldn't stop. Something inside of me snapped. All of the anxious tension from months of guilt and shame boiled over into an uncontrollable hate. It couldn't end this way. Not for Mark, not for me. I wasn't going to hurt him. Not again, and I wouldn't let anything else do it either. A barefooted puppet wrapped her arms around my waist in a flying tackle. The gun flew from my right hand, the knife from my left, and we both went down in a heap, the muck spattering our limbs. I rolled with the puppet in the grass and mud like a wild animal, biting, clawing, and screaming with visceral hostility. She tried to gnaw at my face, but I drove my thumb up to the knuckle in her squishy dead eyeball and pushed the girl to the ground. Mark's shotgun roared back to life, and when the gun ran dry, he swung it like a baton, shoving the buttstock into the oncoming noses of our wide-eyed pursuers with rapid succession. My hand found a rock, and I hefted it high, swinging with all my might like I was back at junior high softball at the pitcher's mound. Crack! Again, I brought it down, burying the chunk of limestone into the limp puppet's head, screaming shrilly with every blow. My voice cracked, my lungs raw from the damp air, and my pulse roared in my ear to reach a bloodthirsty crescendo. An arm wound around me from behind, and I tore at the thick coat sleeve with my chipped fingernails, head awash with adrenaline. "Let go of me, you scummy—" "Easy, easy, easy, it's me." Mark shuffle ran backward with me in tow, his shotgun in the other hand, as a crowd of puppets heaved through the flattened grass. "Get up, they're coming!" My knees were shakier than I remembered them being, but I pulled both feet back under me, and together we sprinted toward the main building of the coal yard. I threw open a rusty metal door at the base of the concrete tower, and as soon as we were through, we both shoved it closed. Snatching a piece of rusted angle iron from a nearby corner, Mark jammed it through the narrow door handles. He stepped back just as a chorus of bangs erupted on the other side. Fists, arms, feet, his heads ramming the sheet steel in a cacophony of sound. "It's not gonna hold!" I paced in a frantic search of the dimly lit interior for something else to use as a barricade. "Mark, where are we going?" "There." He headed for a concrete alcove in the wall, where a set of recessed, dusty steps wound upward. "Head to the top. We're almost through." With our feet pounding on the cement, Mark and I raced even higher in the abandoned stairwell as small broken windows gushed wind and rain onto us at regular intervals. The corroded doors buckled and dozens of puppets swarmed into the tower, some on all fours with glowing eyes and hellish croaks. Everything flashed by in the frame of my dim red headlamp, like a nightmare of blood red and dirt black all rolled together. Lightning lit up the world outside, and my eyes caught a large, slender figure in the glow of the storm. "Look out!" The words barely left my mouth, and the floor beneath my shoes shook like an earthquake had struck. Caught by surprise, Mark tripped, and the massive gray hand plunged through the wall to slam down where he had been a second ago. Like a child groping for a toy in the dark, the big one prodded the stairwell with clumsy fingers. Each shove of the gigantic hand only widened the hole in the wall and knocked more concrete loose from the dilapidated structure. Large cracks ran over the walls, across the ceiling, and down the floor, and the building shifted on its foundation with a sickening crunch.
"It's going to knock the whole thing down on top of us."
Unarmed and panicking, I dove into the shadows like a rabbit on the run. I've been dreading this moment. Everything up to this point has a play-by-play of the worst moments of my existence. And I know I'm not ready to recount this part. But what other choice do I have? This needs to end, and I can't until the entire tale is told. In the chaotic darkness, a shotgun racked, and the 12-gauge sang into the night with defiance. The big one howled and jerked its arm back through the opening, the sudden movement enough to send the section of stairwell behind us crumbling down. The chasm yawned, more of the steps collapsed, and I heard the collective shriek of the puppet horde as they were buried under the falling rubble. "Now's our chance." Mark pushed me up the remaining stairs. "Go! Get to the—" Crash! Like a freight train of blind rage, the clenched fist of the big one exploded through the wall, and Mark flew sideways. Unable to keep my feet, I pulled myself into a recess on the rough, cold cement in an effort to keep from being crushed. Rain and wind trickled in from the gap in the tower and against the backdrop of lightning. I realized I sat at shoulder height to the enormous gray visage. The red light from my headlamp caught its face, and I recoiled in terror. Crouched low to peer into the gap, the big one studied me without eyes, its face a mass of tangled, gnarled tree branches, all woven together. Something hummed in the back of my brain, a whining that pried into every fold of my thoughts and paralyzed my limbs. Whispers rose in the static, soft voices that urged me to not fight, to stay still, that it was so much sweeter on the other side. The pain wouldn't last long. I wouldn't feel it after a while. So warm and dry. It'd be just like falling asleep.
Sleep sounds good. I could sleep. Maybe it won't hurt if I just...
A bright orange glow flared to life. The static fizzled out. My heart pounded with a sudden migraine, and a wave of nausea roiled in my guts. To my right, Mark slumped against the far wall, holding a green glass bottle with a flaming rag tied to the neck of it. Rivulets of blood poured down from a gash on his scalp, and his right leg lay twisted at a horrible angle. But Mark wound his arm back and hurled the bottle with all the energy he had left. Yellow flames exploded over the tangled branches of its face, and and the big one reeled with an agonized screech. Awash in fire, the creature stampeded for the nearby tree line, its bellows louder than the storm raged overhead. All around its feet, those puppets that hadn't been buried in the collapsed stairwell scurried away in hasty retreat. Lightning snapped, the thunder boomed, and all at once everything fell silent again, save for the ancient mutterings of the wind and rain. I fell forward onto my hands and knees and puked over the edge of the ruined stairwell, the dark rubble below swallowing the vomit with cruel indifference. Cold crept through me now. The adrenaline had worn off, and I realized how much black gore was smeared over my face, arms, chest, and hands. I beat that one girl to death. I crushed her face in with a rock. Dear God, what's happening to me? With both eyes shut, I pictured my dad at the gun range teaching me how to shoot, in his words about surviving bad situations. You've got to stay calm, Maddie. No matter what, stay calm, breathe, and act. If you do that, you'll be okay. Gotta go. I sucked in a deep breath and forced myself not to gag at the taste of bile in my mouth. Mark, we have to go. He didn't respond. My knees almost gave out the first time I stood up, and I had to brace myself against the ruined wall. Exhaustion threatened to bring me down, and my ears throbbed as if someone had shoved needles down inside them. Still, I turned back to my friend and groped to find the switch on my headlamp. Click. I slapped one filthy hand over my mouth to stifle another wave of nausea. In the scarlet light, Mark's blood looked black and pooled on the cement beneath him. Bright white bones stuck out from his snapped leg, the end jagged and slick. Mark's eyes were shut, one half of his face red with blood, and the other pale as the new-fallen snow. Mark? I squeaked the words out, too afraid to admit what I suspected to be true. Mark, please say something. Mark? His head rolled limply onto one shoulder, and my heart skipped a frantic beat. The bags. I scrambled for my green satchel, tore it apart in a search for something to help. My hands smeared black goo over everything, but I didn't care. There had to be something, either in his kit or mine, to fix this. A small green nylon pouch surfaced, and I saw a little red cross stitched onto the flap. Yes! In spite of everything, I shouted with joy and hugged the little pack to my chest. My clumsy cold fingers struggled to unzip it, and I pawed through the contents until I found a black tourniquet, like the ones my father stockpiled in our basement for the day the world decided to end. I'd hardly paid attention when he showed me how to use them, but the instructions still resonated in my mind, and I decided that if I ever got home, I'd hug Dad so hard his ribs would break. High and tight. I gritted my teeth and laced the strap around Mark's thigh, well above the shattered femur. Yanking it as hard as I could, I tried not to think about how Mark didn't even groan in pain as I wound the little metal windlass to staunch the tide of glistening blood. Somewhere in the distance, another whale-like bellow echoed, and I swallowed a nervous bile-flavored lump. We could make it. I talked to him, more to keep from crying than anything else, and slid my shoulder under Mark's armpit. Come on, get up. Up, 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 come on. But no matter how much I strained, I couldn't lift him. My leg muscles shot from the terrified run through the fields, Mark's 170-pound frame like a fallen log. I clawed the gray rucksack off his back along with the red duffel bag and tossed aside the green shoulder bag he'd given me. I strained, screamed in desperation, but fell to my knees, spent. A glimpse at his still face sent an icy chill down my spine, and I put 2 fingers to Mark's throat. Stupid idiot, you should have checked sooner. Panicked, I rolled Mark onto his back on the cold concrete and pressed my hands to his sternum, my brain a fog and fear. Mark, you have to wake up. Come on, wake up. Wake up. I pumped at his chest, put my ear to his mouth, and listened. Nothing. You can't do that. I spat, angry and scared.
tears brimming in my eyes. You can't leave me. You can't. Again and again, I leaned on his diaphragm, and this time I lifted Mark's chin to put my mouth to his. Every bit of guilt and shame rushed back to choke me at the sensation of his soft lips on mine, but I had to fight through it to breathe air into his lungs. My arms began to cramp. Seconds passed, and my despair grew. Mark wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, and his pulse. Please, God, don't do this. I'm so sorry. I've been such a fool. Please don't take him. Not like this. Please. My brain began to accept the inevitable, and tears streamed down my face, along with the cold rain, salty and bitter. This was all my fault. If I hadn't come back this year, hadn't stayed too long after work, hadn't stopped to talk to him in the parking lot, Mark wouldn't be here. He'd saved me, cared for me, forgiven me, and after everything, I'd led him to his death. I didn't deserve that kind of love. I didn't deserve Mark Petrick. Giving up, I dropped my head to his chest, my wet hair hanging in curtains around my grimy face. Maddie. I jerked back with a muffled scream of surprise. Mark blinked up at me, his face almost gray, but his eyes still warm chocolate brown. You okay? Unable to speak through relieved sobs, I threw my arms around his shoulders and curled up beside him on the cold cement. Mark slid one sluggish arm around me, and I relished what little warmth I could feel coming from his chest beneath the layers of waterlogged clothes. Can't stay here, he grunted into my ear, and Mark winced as though the pain had at last started to set in. You can't stay. I pressed my face to his collarbone and shook my head like a stubborn child. I'm not going without you. His fingers squeezed my arm in earnest, though his strength seemed to wane by the minute. Yes, you are. If that thing comes back, it'll rip this place apart, and you won't make it to the exit. You have to leave me here. No! I clung to him even harder. My voice cracked like a glass dropped from a skyscraper. I'll fight it. I'll use one of your firebombs. That was the last one. He sighed, and something about the way he sounded, so tired, so weak, made my chest throb. And it just made it angry. You have to go, or it'll kill you. His fingers laced into my hair, the braid long gone, the strands now wild tangles around my neck. Mark pulled, in a gentle but insistent pull, and I brought my head up to meet his gaze. In the dark, with the rain and wind whipping outside our hovel, the lightning slithered through the sky and revealed Mark's thin smile. You can do it. You just have to focus. Still have your gun? Shame burned across my cheeks. I think I lost it. In the field. That's fine. He rolled his head to nod at the far wall, which still bore his bloodstains. Take my shotgun. Got more slugs for it in my coat. And my knife. You'll need it. My eyes stung with fresh waves of remorse, and I went to shake my head, but Mark's touch on my face stopped me, his calloused fingers wiping away the tears. You'll be all right. Come on, get my ruck, and the red bag too. My arms and legs seemed to move on their own, and I crawled over to lug the bags to Mark. The 12 gauge was covered in concrete dust, with dents and scratches on its wooden stock, but otherwise remained functional, and I slung the heavy weapon over my shoulder like I'd seen him do. Put the gun on your chest. Mark nudged his folded gray jacket my way, along with the silver-colored camping knife from his belt, and grimaced as though the pain intensified with every move he made. You'll have to drop from high up and roll onto your back. Don't want to break your spine on that thing.
Drop? I choked, fear and pain mingling in my head.
What do you mean?
Mark flicked his eyes up the dark stairs above us.
There's a room at the top of the tower with 4 windows all around it. There should be a stack of harnesses under one of them. Once you put one on, hitch it to a cable outside and ride it like a zip line across the opposite field. At the end, the line stops about 10 feet off the ground. You'll have to cut yourself loose and drop down.
My throat turned dry, but I pulled his jacket on over my slender shoulders and tried to focus on his instructions, even as apocalyptic footsteps echoed in the tree line not far away.
Okay, then what? If you made the sacrifice right, you should be able to see a light from the base of the cable pole. Head for that. There's going to be a lot of freaks hanging around the exit, so run like the wind and don't look back.
Both eyebrows hitched higher on my face, and a word stuck out among all the others.
Sacrifice? Wait, what sacrifice?
Mark made a grim, stoic nod.
Usually, if you want to leave here, you have to give up something really important to you. Something you can't get replaced. I had to leave my heirloom pocket watch behind last time Randy came to get me. He had to leave his wedding band.
My heart sank. I had left my necklace at home in my room, and with nothing in my pockets but a cheap flashlight and an old candy wrapper, I would be trapped.
But I don't have anything.
He met my confusion with an apologetic smile, and I realized what Mark meant.
No!
It came out as a whimper more than a scream, my soul writhing from the terrible truth. But Mark gripped my wrist with a desperate gleam in his eyes.
I can't make that jump. Not with my leg like this. You've got nothing to give, and you can't carry me and make the sprint at the end. But if I stay, I should be enough to get you through. I won't go without you. Shaking off his grasp, I tried to be angry, but only felt more miserable by the second. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. He cupped my chin, and despite myself, I leaned into his touch, the palm still warm enough to make my spine tingle in that pleasant way I had known was possible. And I won't let you die here. Mark ran his thumb over my cheek in a tenderness that made a guilty fire blaze inside my heart. Now hurry up. We don't have much time. Trying to hold myself together, I sorted through the dirty, torn bags, all the while fighting the fog of hypothermia that crept into my brain. Gotta stay awake. I can't pass out. Not now. Mark drew a shuddery breath and cringed at his mutilated leg. In the top flap, there's a road flare. I need it. I found it. A brown cardboard wrapped tube with a red cap on one end. Too numb to be confused, I handed him the flare and heard plastic clatter on the concrete floor. Instantly, we both knew exactly what it was. Mark nodded at the little plastic hairbrush, his eyes softening. Would you? Sure. I placed it in Mark's cold grasp, and my heart ached at how he clutched the brush to his chest with tender affection. He's losing her. No more Claire, no more kids, no farmhouse in the woods. He's losing everything. All because of me. Mark shut his eyes, sniffled, and held the brush out to me. Take this when you go. Another wave of nausea slammed into me, and I whipped my head back and forth. No, I can't. Maddie, please. His voice broke, halfway between begging and groaning in agony from his wounds. I don't want it stuck here, too. Take it to Claire and tell her that I held on to Mark like he was an anchor keeping me from going adrift in the storm. I know. I'll tell her. I promise.
He pushed the brush into my left hand. His own still welded to my right, and a volcano rose inside my brain. I wasn't just looking at Mark Petrick, my goofy friend from work who liked my cupcakes and my terrible karaoke. The man lying beside me meant more to me than all of that, and it hit me now, just what I was losing.
I'm sorry.
It exploded for me at last, a cascade of emotion all tangled into one giant mess. The tears hot on my face, every breath short and excruciating. I didn't know what else to say, couldn't put my feelings into words now when it mattered most, but I knew then that I cared for him more than ever before. I was sorry that I'd let this happen. Sorry I'd not stayed in my car. Sorry I'd brushed him off in the parking lot. And I was so very sorry that all those months ago, I turned away my one chance to be more than Mark Petrick's friend from Carnivore Cove. Don't. His fingers tightened on mine, and Mark let slide a sympathetic grin that held flickers of something deeper, remnants of feelings that drove nails into my heart. You have nothing to be sorry for. You're here, and that's all that matters. Now, help me up. Watching my arms move almost independent of myself, I propped him against the wall, hating every second of it. Mark pulled the red duffel bag close and unzipped it to reveal a metal pressure cooker coated with nails and tape, a bundle of wires that led to some big square batteries, and a repurposed digital stopwatch. Outside, the footsteps thundered closer, and the screeches returned, the horde of puppets ready to finish the job.
I wish I had more time. One more minute, one more day, just one. Even if it meant watching him with Claire, I'd be okay with that.
I shouldered the green bag and turned from the steps to look back at Mark. He struck the end of the flare to ignite it, the stairwell bathed in its blood-red light, and threw me a warm, handsome smile for the last time. You're still one in a million, Maddie. Doing my best to grin through my waterfall of tears, I felt my heart tear in half inside of me.
Goodbye, Mark.
With that, I smothered a mournful sob and sped up the stairs. Shadows closed in around me in accusatory sheets, and the tears smeared with Mark's red blood on my cheek to form a bitter avalanche of regret. Everything seemed to move in slow motion now that seconds counted, and I wanted nothing more than to wake up in my own bed and discover that this entire nightmare was over. A colossal Baleen roar rumbled through the earth, even as I charged through a small metal door at the top of the stairs and skittled to a halt in surprise. Unlike everywhere else in this hellscape road, the small square room was dry, its windows mysteriously intact, and all around the mundane cement walls lay heaps of random items. Pictures, rings, a golden pocket watch that I suspected was Mark's, and various other trinkets sat in reverent heaps like treasures in the tomb of some ancient civilization. A hollow sensation tore through me at the thought that my sacrifice lay only 17 steps down from here, with gentle hands, a kind smile, and chocolate brown eyes that melted me every time.
Focus. The cable. Find the cable.
To one side, a pile of dusty, multicolored harnesses caught my eye, like the kind we had for the zipline attractions at New Wilderness. It had been a while since I'd been on a zipline, but I didn't have much of a choice. I picked one, yellow, Mark's favorite color, and stepped into it. Rabid cries floated up from the ground outside, and a shadowy figure strode into view, fixated on the red glow of Mark's flare. Shoving open the window above the stack of harnesses, I braced my hands against the dry, rotted frame and leaned out into the icy wind. There, above me, a braided steel cable ran from a heavy mounting and stretched out into the gloom, far across the soggy grass fields that surrounded the old coal building. A small flicker of hope kindled inside me, the prospect of this ordeal ending like sweet intoxication to my mind. "Maddie, go!" Mark's cry split the night, and I glanced down to find the big one right underneath me, peering into the gap it had made in the stairwell during the previous attack. It slid one massive hand into the breach, and I fumbled to clip the rusted carabiner onto the cable. Click. The second it latched on, I threw myself out the window, and the metal cable whined at my rapid descent. I spun on the end of the nylon strap and twisted my neck to look back toward the tower. Boom! An explosion ripped through the night. Pillars of flame gushed from the hole in the tower, and the big one let out a long, loud roar of agony. For one split second, I could see everything silhouetted in the darkness, the puppets piling on top of each other in an attempt to climb the outer walls, the big one stumbling backward with its head and arms wreathed in orange flame, and the lonely tower where my best friend had been, coated in thick black smoke. It shrank into the distance until the darkness swallowed the terrible scene, and I shut my eyes to let loose a wail of unbearable grief. Deep, rending pain brought scream after scream from me. Loud sobs and cries I never would have emitted around anyone. Wordless sorrow that made me want to die for the emptiness it left in my center. Gone. Mark was gone. A sudden lurch broke me from my weeping, and I looked up to find myself suspended in space, a large frayed knot in the cable having stopped me right before a tall, rusty steel pole. The ground lay not far under me, coated in rain-soaked brush and chest-high grass. Was this the exit Mart had spoken of? Or once again, had I been foiled, tricked by this awful place into yet another hellish maze? Sniffling, I spun on the end of my harness like a spider on its web and peered into the rainy abyss. Is that a light? My heart jerked, and I gasped between renewed sobs at a dim, yet discernible white glow not 200 yards away, across a low-lying section of grassland. It was so close. All I had to do was run to the light, and I'd be free. I could go home. Pulling Mark's camping knife from my belt, I sawed at the nylon harness, my nerves grating with each snap of the tiny fibers that brought me closer to the inevitable drop. Almost there. Almost. Like an invisible hand had released me, I plummeted downward, my heels slamming into the spongy muck of the wet earth. My butt hit the ground next, and I almost rolled over in a complete somersault, both legs flying up into the air. The aches of both feet stung, and the wind had been knocked out of me. But I was alive. Somewhere off to my right, an eerie shriek crackled into the night air, and my blood ran cold. "Oh, come on," I muttered under my breath, exasperated and desperate. I'd come so far, lost so much, and now my way out was right there. Yet still, I would be hunted like a rabbit to the very end. No, not like a rabbit. I'm not dying like that. My hands found Mark's shotgun, and I thumbed the safety off. Through the clearing, the rain fell, the wind hissed, and everything waited for me to make my move. "This is for you, Mark." I darted through the grass. My sore legs moved underneath me with renewed energy, and the field erupted into chaos. From the mud, twisted and distended limbs dragged macabre figures into the light of my headlamp. Not quite puppets, but certainly not human. They were broken and torn, rotten and decayed. But worst of all, they were all the same. "Maddie," they called in a sing-song mockery of his soft voice. The dozens of half-rotted Marks staggering after me, their arms outstretched. Each one bore his face, his mousy hair, his strong arms, even his brown eyes. But without the warmth, the life, the love. They materialized in waves from the grass, the trees,
and the muck in various stages of decay, repeating any words the darkness had overheard him saying in a cruel mantra. "Maddie, run! Maddie, please! Maddie, stop!" Fear sliced through me, but it paled in comparison to the grief that came with Mark's words being replayed from their vile throats. My eyes blurred with tears at how real they looked. The clotted blood made my heart ache, the horrid wounds like razor blades to my soul, and step by step, the sadness overwhelmed my terror. Mark was dead, yet his death now chased me through the tall grass with Cheshire grins and haunting calls, tormenting me for my mistake. A figure popped up right in my path, his back to me. The Mark apparition snapped his head over backwards so that his chin faced the sky. With the awful crunching of shattered neck bones, he gave me a wide, inverted smile. "Strawberry upside down." He lunged at me with his decayed arms bent at unnatural angles, and a throaty laugh frothed out from his fluid-filled lungs. "Stop it!" The shotgun bucked against my shoulder, and the apparition's head disappeared. Black goo misting into the air where it had been. Stifling my own tortured sob, I sidestepped the corpse and ran on, the white light just ahead as more enemies shambled through the grass. They closed in from all sides, so much that I stopped trying to aim the shotgun and simply pumped round after round into every counterfeit mark that came within range. Pulling the trigger sent a fresh stab into my already destroyed heart, and when they didn't die right away, they screamed with a surprisingly convincing imitation of Mark's pained cries. I had to force myself to shoot, to murder him over and over again, and my raw emotions continued to bleed rivers the entire way. Mottled dead hand snagged at my green shoulder bag, and I slipped it off without a glance backward. My scabbling fingers couldn't find any more shells in the pockets of Mark's jacket, so I wielded the 12-gauge like a club until another apparition caught it by the sling and yanked it away. There were so many of them, the grass so tall, the hands reaching from everywhere, and the light seemed so far away. Clammy fingers grabbed a fistful of my loose hair, and I drew the last weapon I had. With a desperate yell, I spun around and plunged Mark's knife into the imitation's face. As soon as it let go, I pushed through a wall of hands, finally able to feel the white light's rays on my face, and threw myself into the grass beyond. My foot plummeted over an unseen bank and I went down. I rolled through grass and mud, across a small briar bush, and into a shallow water-filled ditch. Rain clambered down around me. My body ached with fatigue, and overhead, the dark storm clouds rumbled with hidden tongues of lightning. Too exhausted to stand, I lay there in a crumpled heap and shut my eyes, ready for the fiends to rip into me. I waited. Nothing. Daring to open my eyes, I sat up. Aside from the whistle of the wind, the curtains of the rain and droning thunder, the shrieks had ceased, the apparitions gone. No one called my name, and I could hear no crashing in the underbrush. Somehow, I was alone once more. Confused, I crawled out of the ditch and felt something smooth and hard under my palms. What was that? It felt so familiar, yet my tired, frazzled mind couldn't place it. So cold. Gotta get warm. Have to get warm and dry. I struggled to stand, but fell, my ankles and knees so worn from my ordeal that I could barely move. My skin felt like old rubber. My fingers wouldn't bend, and I shivered uncontrollably. The air began to glow. A loud metallic screeching split the air, and two bright blue orbs stopped not 5 yards away. Whatever new thing was coming for me would have an easy meal.
and I struggled back toward the ditch as the lights flooded over me. Footsteps thudded nearer, and I raised my hands to shield myself in the blinding aura of the light. "Maddie?" I flinched. Perhaps the apparitions had followed me after all? A man stepped into view with brown work boots, dark blue jeans, and a tan Carhartt coat. He had auburn hair like me and wide, worried eyes that took in my bedraggled appearance with horror and disbelief. No doubt I looked like someone from a disaster movie, covered in cuts and bruises, my hair in a tangle, wearing mud and blood-smeared clothes that weren't my own, with a vacant stare in my eyes that had seen things too scarring to forget. "No!" I shook my head and scuttled away as best I could. I wasn't going to fall for this. Not now. "Maddie, it's me." The man edged closer, his hands held out in a show of peace. "For God's sakes, what happened?" "It's not him. It can't be. You're not real." I dragged myself backwards on numb elbows, too weak to fight, but too hateful to die. "You're not. I know what you are." "Madison, listen to me. I've been looking for you everywhere. Sweetheart, please." He stepped closer, and I palmed around for a rock, a stick, anything to use as a weapon. "I just need to get one good swing at his head." But there was nothing except that strange, hard surface that hung on the edge of my mind as if behind a bank of fog. I had run out of time, and if he was in fact a fake, I might as well find out on my own terms. "If you're real," I met his eyes, sky blue like mine, and fought the instinctive urge to cry. "Then where did we go for my 12th birthday?" The man crouched down onto his heels, and a small, fond smile crossed his face. "Cedar Point." "Cedar Point." A dam broke inside me, and my eyes pooled with tears I didn't think I could make. I realized in that moment how the sky already seemed clearer, the rain thinner, the thunder more distant. White painted lines on the hard black asphalt of Route 142 stretched away into the night, cool and firm beneath my ragged palms. The lights were headlights. The man crouched in front of me with two well-worn hands held out. "Dad?" I tried to crawl to him, and my father scooped me off the asphalt without pause. Crying uncontrollably, I let myself fall apart while he carried me to his truck, feeling like I'd just woken up from the worst nightmare of my life. The starry night sky slowly reappeared overhead, and at long last, my fear melted away. Over. It was over. At least, the easy part was. Every day after the incident became a blur of one horrible situation after another. I was shuffled from the police station, to the hospital, to a therapist in a loop, forced to retell the same story to the point that I gave up trusting anyone. No one believed me, not even my parents, and I had 3 separate mental breakdowns in the course of a week. At first, the police assumed that I'd been brutally assaulted and suspected Mark. When I vehemently disagreed with that, they decided that someone else had attacked me and convinced my parents to have me undergo an invasive, uncomfortable examination in the local emergency clinic to prove them wrong. Sitting in that tiny cold room after the exam was older, I bawled my eyes out, feeling more alone than I ever had in my entire life. Next, the detectives involved with the investigation recruited a therapist who had one too many colors in her attention-desperate butch haircut to put me on a slew of antipsychotics, which I promptly flushed down the toilet. But the real blow came when they confiscated the clothes Mark had given me and said they suspected me of killing him, which almost made me vomit the first time one of them suggested it. Without the old t-shirt, flannel jacket, and wrinkled camouflage pants, all I had left to remember Mark by was the pink plastic hairbrush, which I had hidden away in my room the night Dad brought me home. I would have strangled the person who tried to take it from me. This whirlwind of speculation fed the rumor mill at New Wilderness, and soon half of my former friends wanted nothing to do with me, assuming I was in fact responsible for Mark's death. The other half treated me like some kind of broken china figurine, convinced that Mark had in fact hurt me, and I was just too traumatized to admit it to myself. Even Kendra made snide comments about Mark when she thought I wasn't paying attention, saying she hoped it was hot where he was. I spent the whole day crying in the bathroom after she said that. Soon the story went viral, and people who didn't even know Mark began trashing him online, saying he deserved what he got, that men like him were scum, and I was a classic example of Stockholm Syndrome. More than once, I got into comment fights with such keyboard ghouls, and my outbursts got me banned from several platforms. How anyone could believe he'd done something like that, when I was the primary witness who insisted he'd done nothing wrong, made my blood boil. Then came the funeral. I found myself walking up to the tiny gray brick funeral home alone, having begged my dad to stay in the car. He'd wanted to come with me, now officially vindicated beyond belief that the world was out to hurt his precious baby girl, and he never went anywhere without his gun tucked into his belt. Still, I made him stay, mainly because I didn't want him to see all the hateful looks I was sure to get from the people who loved Mark, and thought of me as nothing more than either the source of his reputational slander or his murderess. It was bad enough that I had to endure their scorn. I didn't want Dad to see it too. My black sweater itched, but it covered me from wrist to neck, made me feel a little more invisible and didn't stand out in the crowd. I couldn't bring myself to sign the visitor roster, my stomach turning sour just looking at the table with Mark's photograph nestled amongst all the white plastic candles. He would have hated the whole thing, the overwhelming aroma of old lady perfume, the soft organ music in the background, and the dollar store quilts with pictures of doves on them. Of course, there was no casket, no body. No one here even knew where Mark Petrick had died. No one but me. The line to the little shrine of pictures that stood in for a coffin was long, and I spent most of the time staring at my scuffed black dress boots, the resentful eyes from around the room enough to burn a hole in my heart. It hurt enough to know that Mark was gone, but to be detested by those who loved him, and had been loved by him, that was a new level of torture I dreaded for days. At last, I reached the front and stepped underneath the little wicker archway. "Hey, stranger. Long time no see." My heart twitched, and I choked back tears. Dozens of pictures of him decorated the wicker siding and stood in frames on various stands beneath the arch. Mark smiling at high school graduation, Mark in his green army fatigues, fresh out of basic training, Mark at a table in college, sleeping when he should have been studying, Mark embracing a pretty blonde girl who wore a shiny diamond ring on one finger. At last, my eyes settled on Mark in his black New Wilderness uniform shirt, standing with the other veterans during the Veterans Appreciation Day photo shoot. He beamed back at me from the glass frame, proud and gentle, sweet and kind, my best friend, and a good man. One I didn't deserve. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the pink plastic hairbrush, its handle still peppered with a few flecks of his dried blood, and set it beside the picture. It looked odd amongst all the prim and proper gifts, but I knew it would find its way into the right hands. Besides, I felt better seeing it alongside Mark's amazing smile. I turned and found myself at the head of the procession that passed by Mark's waiting family members, his red-eyed father, weeping mother, stoic sisters, and morose brother. At the end of the line stood a pretty blonde girl, that same diamond ring on her finger, her head hung low with sad, empty eyes glued to the floor. A few older women pushed past me to throw themselves into the arms of Mark's mother, and I used them as a smokescreen to slip away from the rest of the crowd. Coming to a stop in front of the blonde girl, I waited till she raised her head, my heart pounding like a trip hammer. "Claire?" She blinked at me, forlorn but calm, as though the girl had already grieved too much to break down on a day like today. Still, in the blue irises that stared back at me, I could see the pain there, the shattered heart of someone who had loved Mark with all her soul and only have him stolen away, without even saying goodbye. I coughed, unsure how to proceed. "I'm Madison." "Oh." Claire looked back down at her hands and picked nervously at her thumbnail. "Get it over with, so she can have some comfort in hating you." I shut my eyes, pictured Mark's warm grin, and drew a deep breath. "I was the girl who... I know who you are." A stiff cringe almost snapped my spine, but I opened my eyes to find Claire watching me, not with anger or hatred, but with a small, sympathetic smile. "Mark and I didn't keep secrets from each other. Before we got engaged, he told me about you. He said you made really good cupcakes." "Of course he did." I laughed, though it came out as a choked sob. "Strawberry upside down." Claire fought hard against her own tears, though she sighed fondly in a way that made me feel a million times worse. "Strawberry upside down." Silence reigned between us, and I didn't know what to say. Her touch on my arm startled me from my stupor. "You were with him when it happened?" My soul writhed, and tears started to roll down my face, hot and salty. How could I tell her the truth? If anyone deserved to know, it was Claire, but could I even begin to explain what Mark had died for? He'd braved a terrible unknown, sacrificed everything, his life, his love, his dreams, for me, and I didn't even know how to put that into words for his grieving fiancée. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw desperation there, an excruciating need to know the truth. I nodded. Claire shut her eyes and grimaced against the agony that must have been welling up inside her chest. How did he die?" "You're one in a million, Maddie." Mark's voice echoed in my head with a thunderclap of clarity, and I forced myself to return Claire's sad gaze. "Protecting me." A flash of pride crossed the pretty features of Claire's face, and she made a valiant attempt to grin once more. "That sounds like him." We both chuckled through our torment, but I knew I had one last thing to do. "It's my fault." The truth ripped from me like a knife, and I couldn't stop myself from sobbing, the pain in my chest too much to bear. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't know." She wrapped me in a tight hug before I could say anything more, and I felt moist tears on my shoulder as we mourned together. There was no insecurity in her embrace, no reservation or faux kindness, just the empathy of someone who hurt for the same reason as I did. With the whole world watching, my internal protective walls crumbled, and I wept with Claire over the man who had changed our lives forever. We talked and shared stories about Mark the rest of the night, until Dad wandered in to make sure I was okay. Claire turned out to be really nice, and we decided to stay in touch,
the first real friendship I had had since that awful night. I figured Mark would have wanted that, for both of us. All of that was 4 months ago. 4 months. It feels like a horrible lifetime. Someone else's life. A foreign dream where I don't belong, but am trapped in all the same. That's why I volunteered to take Mark's place in the Night Rangers. At first, everyone in the entire park was against it, but I begged Randy, the head of security, until he finally agreed out of sheer pity. Of course, my parents were furious, but they knew they couldn't stop me. Not after I told them that I'd go even if I had to walk. I know no one else will understand, but the instant I saw the position come up for new applicants, I knew it had to be me. Even now, sitting here in the company truck next to the visitor center, I can hear thunder booming in the distance as the sky grows darker, the lightning rippling in the clouds, calling to me with cruel anticipation. My father's Armalite rifle is propped up on the passenger seat, along with a canvas bandolier full of loaded magazines. The necklace that my grandma got for me is around my neck, so I have something to sacrifice if I make it that far. In the event that I don't, my grandpa's old bowling bag holds a steel pressure cooker filled with jellied gasoline, the outside covered with taped-on framing nails, and several batteries wired to a digital baking timer. I suppose the FBI will freak if they ever find this post, but they don't have to worry. I'm not after them. If you're reading this, Dad, Mom, I love you. I hope I can tell you in the morning, but if not, then understand that this isn't suicide. Not technically. I'm doing my job as a ranger. That thing killed my best friend, and if someone doesn't stop it, it's only a matter of time before the big one takes more innocent people. Mark knew that, and it cost him everything. I can't let his death be in vain. To anyone else who just so happens to stumble upon this final excerpt of my sad little tale, I hope you live your life well. Soak up the sun, find a job you love, and most importantly, hold on to the people who care about you. You never know when you're going to lose them. And if you are ever around the New Wilderness Wildlife Reservation on a stormy, rainy night, please stay away from Tauerpin Road.